Think about the last time you ate chicken. Maybe it was dinner last night, grilled, fried, roasted, or pulled apart over rice. Maybe it is in your refrigerator right now. Maybe you had it for lunch without even registering it as a choice, because chicken has become so default, so universal, so completely embedded in daily eating that most people consume it several times a week without thinking twice. Chicken is the most consumed meat on Earth, more than pork, more than beef, more than all other poultry combined. The world produces over 130 million tons of chicken meat every single year, and the process that produces it, from hatched chick to packaged product, happens on a scale, at a speed, and with a level of biological and engineering precision that most people would find genuinely difficult to believe. Today we are going inside that process. The hatcheries, the grow-out houses, the technology, the people, and the extraordinary industrial system that puts chicken on your plate every single day. Let's go. The United States is the world's second largest producer of chicken after China and the largest exporter of chicken meat globally. American poultry production is concentrated in the southeastern states. Arkansas, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, and Mississippi lead domestic production, where the combination of a warm climate, abundant feed grain supply, and generations of industry infrastructure have made the region the undisputed capital of American chicken production. Brazil is the world's largest chicken exporter, supplying markets across the Middle East, Asia, and Africa with enormous volumes of frozen chicken. China is the largest overall producer, but consumes the vast majority of what it grows domestically. Together, these three countries drive a global industry that produces more individual animals per year than any other livestock sector in human history. The largest individual poultry operations in the United States house millions of birds simultaneously across dozens of grow-out houses on a single property. And the biological efficiency of the modern broiler chicken, the specific breed raised for meat production, is one of the most dramatic achievements in the entire history of animal agriculture. Before we get into how commercial chicken farming actually works, you need to understand something about the modern broiler chicken that most people find genuinely startling when they first hear it. In 1925, it took a broiler chicken about 4 months to reach a market weight of 2.5 pounds. Today, the modern commercial broiler chicken reaches a market weight of 6 pounds or more in just 42 days, 6 weeks. From hatched chick to full-size market bird in 6 weeks flat. Crazy, right? That is not just faster feeding. That is the result of over 70 years of intensive selective breeding that has fundamentally transformed the biology of the chicken, its feed conversion efficiency, its muscle growth rate, its appetite, and its entire metabolic priority toward rapid breast muscle development. The modern broiler is so different from its ancestors that it represents one of the most dramatic examples of artificial selection ever achieved in domestic animal breeding. And that biological achievement is the foundation on which the entire modern poultry industry is built. Commercial chicken production operates on what the industry calls an integrator model. A single large company, companies like Tyson, Purdue, Pilgrim's Pride, or Coach Foods in the United States, controls the entire supply chain from the grandparent breeding flocks through the hatcheries, the feed mills, the grow-out farms, the processing plants, and the distribution network. Contract farmers own the grow-out houses and provide the labor to raise the birds, but they do not own the chickens. The integrator owns the birds from hatch to processing. The farmer provides the facility, the utilities, and the daily care. The integrator provides the chicks, the feed, the veterinary oversight, and the technical support. This vertical integration means that virtually every chicken raised for the major commercial market in the United States was born in a hatchery owned by a major company, raised in a contract farmer's house under that company's specifications, and processed in that company's facility. The farmer in the middle provides the land, the building, and the labor, but within a system of rules, requirements, and performance benchmarks set entirely by the integrator. The journey of a commercial chicken begins in the hatchery, and hatcheries are extraordinary facilities. A large commercial hatchery can set 2 million eggs per week. The eggs arrive from breeder farms where parent flocks produce fertilized eggs continuously. In the hatchery, the eggs go into large incubation machines, setters, where temperature, humidity, and egg turning are precisely controlled for 18 days. On day 18, the eggs transferred to hatcher machines, where the internal conditions shift to trigger hatching. Over the next 3 days, the chicks pip through their shells and emerge. Sorting, vaccination, sexing, and the beginning of the data trail that will track each batch of birds through their entire short lives all happen in the hatchery in the hours after hatch. Within 24 hours of hatching, the chicks are in transport boxes and on their way to the grow-out houses. They have never eaten, they have never drunk water, and the clock is running. The grow-out house is where the biology of modern broiler production becomes most visible and most striking. A single grow-out house on a commercial broiler farm is typically between 40 and 60 meters wide and 150 to 200 meters long, roughly the footprint of 2 full-size football fields end to end. A single house holds between 25,000 and 40,000 birds at stocking densities that allow the birds to move freely while maximizing the productive use of the floor space. Modern grow-out houses are highly engineered environments. Computer-controlled ventilation systems maintain precise airflow that removes ammonia, carbon dioxide, and excess heat while keeping the birds at the optimal temperature for growth at each stage of their development. The temperature management starts at 32 to 33 degrees Celsius for day-old chicks and is gradually reduced as the birds develop their own thermoregulation. Lighting programs, the duration and intensity of light the birds receive each day, are carefully managed to control feeding behavior, activity levels, and growth rate. Automatic feeding and watering lines run the full length of the house, delivering feed and fresh water continuously. The former, walking through the house multiple times per day, is monitoring bird behavior, checking equipment, removing any birds that have died, and reading the collective health of the flock from visual cues that experienced growers develop over many production cycles. Feed is the largest single cost in broiler production and the most critical driver of growth performance. Commercial broiler feed is a precisely formulated nutritional program that changes in composition as the birds age, starter, grower, finisher, and withdrawal phases, each calibrated to support the specific growth requirements of that stage while meeting the regulatory requirements for feed additive withdrawal before processing. The feed conversion ratio, the pounds of feed required to produce 1 pound of live weight gain, is the single most watched performance metric in the entire grow-out period. The best-performing modern broiler flocks achieve a feed conversion ratio of around 1.7 to 1.8, meaning the birds gain 1 pound of body weight for every 1.7 to 1.8 pounds of feed consumed. That number is the product of both the genetics of the birds and the management precision of the farm. A flock achieving 1.75 compared to 2.0 on the same feed represents a significant financial difference across 35,000 birds. At around 42 days of age, though some production programs run to 49 days or beyond for larger birds, the birds reach target market weight, and the catch crews arrive. Catching is the most physically and emotionally intense operation in the entire production cycle. Crews of workers enter the darkened house, the lights are dimmed to reduce bird stress, and catch the birds by hand, placing them in transport crates that stack onto trucks. A full catching crew can clear a house of 35,000 birds in 2 to 3 hours. The birds go directly to the processing plant. Time between farm and processing is kept as short as possible, typically under 2 hours. At the processing plant, the birds go through a fully automated process of stunning, slaughter, scalding, defeathering, evisceration, chilling, portioning, and packaging in a continuous line that runs at speeds of 140 or more birds per minute in large operations. A modern integrated broiler processing plant can process over 1 million birds per week. The chicken in the package on the grocery store shelf was a day-old chick less than 7 weeks ago. The people who work in this industry span a range of roles and realities that are rarely discussed together. Contract growers are often farm families who have built significant debt loading the grow-out houses required by integrators. A single modern grow-out house can cost $500,000 to over $1 million to build and equip, and farmers are often required to upgrade their facilities to maintain their contracts. The income from contract growing is modest relative to that investment, and the power imbalance between individual contract farmers and large integrated companies has been the subject of serious policy debate and reform efforts in the United States for years. The processing plant workforce, the people working the evisceration lines, the portioning stations, the packaging lines, is one of the most physically demanding and repetitive manufacturing workforces in American food production. It is overwhelmingly made up of immigrant workers, predominantly Latino and increasingly Southeast Asian and African immigrant communities, working in cold, wet, fast-moving production environments for wages that reflect the competitive intensity of the sector. These workers kept American chicken processing plants running through the COVID-19 pandemic at significant personal risk, a fact that briefly brought national attention to a workforce that is normally completely invisible to the people eating the products they produce. The challenges facing the poultry industry are significant and intensifying. Avian influenza, bird flu, is the most acute threat, with outbreaks capable of destroying entire flocks and requiring the depopulation of millions of birds in affected regions. The 2022 to 2023 outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza in the United States was one of the most severe in history, affecting over 58 million birds and disrupting both supply and pricing across the market. Antibiotic resistance is a growing concern as the industry transitions away from the routine use of antibiotics as growth promoters under pressure from regulators and consumers, a transition that requires more sophisticated health management to maintain the bird health outcomes that antibiotic use previously supported. Animal welfare standards are under increasing scrutiny from consumers, retailers, and regulators, driving investments in enriched housing, slower-growing breeds, and improved catching and transport protocols. And the environmental footprint of intensive poultry production, the manure management, the water use, the land use for feed grain production, and the greenhouse gas emissions is a subject of growing policy attention. The next time you open a package of chicken at the grocery store, think about the 42 days that produced it. A hatchery setting 2 million eggs a week, a day-old chick transported before it had eaten for the first time, a grow-out house the size of 2 football fields managed to within a degree of optimal temperature every hour of every day, a feed conversion ratio tracked to 2 decimal places, a catch crew clearing 35,000 birds in the dark in 2 hours, a processing line running at 140 birds per minute, a contract farmer carrying $500,000 of debt for the right to raise birds they never own, and a worker on a packaging line in a cold plant moving at a speed you could not sustain for 10 minutes, doing it for 8 hours a day, feeding a market that rarely thinks about them. If this video changed how you see that package of chicken, hit like, share it with someone who eats chicken every week, and drop a comment. What country are you watching from, and how much does chicken cost where you live? Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden stories behind the food the world depends on.